Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for July the 12th. Today, we are reading together the final chapter of the book of the Judges, looking at chapter 21. I appreciate so much you taking time to read along with me today. And if you've been reading along so far throughout the entire book of the Judges, we're going to get done with that today. And again, as I mentioned, it's a difficult read in many respects because it just spells out so clearly how unfaithful many of the characters are within the story. There are very few, unfortunately, who have a great deal of redeeming qualities. And unfortunately, today we're not going to see anything better, really, from the Israelites in what takes place in today's chapter. Remember that this goes back. This section of Judges goes back to chapter 19 with the unfaithful, evil, wicked Levites, who certainly was not living up to the expectations of those who were supposed to be the spiritual leaders within Israel at that time. Through a series of events, they end up in Gibeah of the tribe of Benjamin. They are taken into the home of an older man, and the citizens of Gibeah come and try to carry out Sodom and Gomorrah 2.0. The man ends up throwing his concubine out to the wolves, basically, who abuse her and leave her on the doorstep, not just of the house, but the doorstep of death. The man shows little to no compassion or care or remorse for what has happened to his concubine. He ends up taking her back home, cuts her into pieces, sends her out to the rest of the tribes, who then rally together to come together against Benjamin to, as they say, wipe out the evil from the land, which in and of itself is not a bad idea. It's not a bad cause to pursue, but they don't really seek the will of God at all. It is not until Benjamin has had a couple of victories that finally they pursue the will of God, and God says that he's going to bless them in carrying out this punishment against Benjamin, and they almost wipe him out completely. And you could think about it, they've had this great victory. They're riding this real strong high of, in their minds, again, purging the evil from among them. And yet, as the dust settles, they come to a realization that, oh no, we might have taken this a bit too far. And we're going to see how they try to rectify this situation. Again, not seeking God's will, but just trying to find some loopholes and work things out on their own. So let's consider this text in Judges chapter 21 about what are they going to do about Benjamin? How are they going to keep Benjamin's lineage continuing? Judges chapter 21, verse number 1. Judges 21 and verse number 1, the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah. So before their battle with Benjamin, none of us will give his daughter to a Benjaminite in marriage. So the people went to Bethel and sat there before God until evening. They wept loudly and bitterly and cried out, "Why, Yahweh God of Israel, has it occurred that one tribe is missing in Israel today?" Maybe because you wiped them out. Verse 4, the next day, the people got up early, built an altar there, and offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. The Israelites asked who of all the tribes of Israel didn't come to Yahweh with the assembly. For a great oath had been taken that anyone who had not come to Yahweh and Mizpah would certainly be put to death. But the Israelites had compassion on their brothers, the Benjaminites, and said, "Today a tribe has been cut off from Israel. What should we do about wives for the survivors? We've sworn to Yahweh not to give any of our daughters as wives." They asked, which city among the tribes of Israel didn't come to Yahweh and Mizpah? It turned out that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come to the camp and the assembly. For when the roll was called, no men were there from the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead. The congregation sent 12,000 brave warriors there and commanded them, "Go and kill the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the sword, including women and dependents. This is what you should do: completely destroy every male, as well as every woman who has gone to bed with a man." They found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not been intimate with a man, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh in the land of Canaan. The whole congregation sent a message of peace to the Benjaminites who were at Rimmon Rock. The Benjamin returned at that time, and Israel gave them the women they had kept alive from Jabesh Gilead, but there were not enough for them. The people had compassion on Benjamin because Yahweh had made this gap in the tribes of Israel. The elders of the congregation said, "What should we do about wives for those who are left, since the women of Benjamin have been destroyed?" They said, "There must be heirs for the survivors of Benjamin, so that the tribe of Israel will not be wiped out, so that a tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. But we can't give them our daughters as wives, for the Israelites had sworn anyone who gives a wife to a Benjaminite is cursed." They also said, "Look, there's an annual festival to Yahweh at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem and south of Lebonah." When they had commanded then they commanded the Benjaminites, "Go and hide in the vineyards. Watch, and when you see the young women of Shiloh come out to perform the dances, each of you leave the vineyards and catch a wife for yourself from the young women of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. When their fathers or brothers come to us and protest, we will tell them, show favor to them, since we did not get enough wives for each of them in the battle. You didn't actually give the women to them, so you're not guilty of breaking your oath." Excuse me, verse 23, the Benjaminites did this and took a number of women they needed from the dancers they caught. They went back to their own inheritance, rebuilt their cities, and lived in them. At that time, each of the Israelites returned from there to his own tribe and family. Each returned from there to his own inheritance. And the verse that really just summarizes the entirety of Judges is chapter 21 and verse 25. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever seemed right to him. And that concludes Judges 21. And I'll read through the text of the Judges. Whew, man. What just a horrible, horrible chapter of just so much poor decision making. So many poor decisions are being made on behalf of the Israelites. But again, this should not surprise us, given the spiritual environment at this time. They did not respect God. They did not honor him as their king. They did whatever seemed right to them. And what seemed right to them? What seemed right to them was making this vow that they would not give any of their daughters to the Benjamites. What seemed right to them was going and committing great war against Jabesh Gilead. What seemed right to them was going and snatching these women from the vineyards. Where's God mentioned here? He's mentioned in kind of a past tense way, but his will is not sought here. Why do they not go to Yahweh and ask him? Ask him why? What should we do? It says that they sat there before Yahweh and they cried out, "Why, Yahweh God of Israel, has it occurred?" But why not ask him, what should we do now? They don't do that. Again, we shouldn't expect them to do that because everyone's doing whatever seems right to him. So what do? Well, they start looking for loopholes. We all made this vow. Was there any city here that was not in attendance so that we can lay the blame on them basically and use them as a loophole? So the one vow is none of our daughters will be given to Benjamites. Second vow is anybody that's here is going to be put to death. So we take those two things together. Was there anyone here? Was there any town not present? Well, fortunately for Jabesh Gilead, that would be them. So 12,000 of the bravest warriors go and do to Jabesh Gilead what Israel had not even been willing to do against the Canaanite cities. How backwards are we at this point with Israel? How backwards is everything within this nation? So much so that they would go almost wipe out their own in the tribe of Benjamin and then try to rectify that situation by actually wiping out a city of their own in order to steal young women to give to these men who need wives, who, oh, by the way, they need wives because Israel had killed all of them in Gibeah and other places. Again, it is just so backwards. And the thinking is so illogical, but what do we expect? When everyone does what is right in his own eyes, whenever everyone does what seems right to him. A couple of other things that really show us just the backwards understanding and thinking of the people. They seem to blame God on a couple of occasions. Verse 3 seems to say that. Verse 15, the people had compassion on Benjamin because Yahweh had made this gap in the tribes of Israel. I don't know. I don't feel like that is exactly what history tells us. That might be their perception of history. But again, should we expect people who don't look to Yahweh for truth and guidance to see reality and history as it should be? It's interesting, verse 18, that again they reference the oath again, and then verse 19 they said, look, there's an annual festival to Yahweh in Shiloh. It should end right there, probably a statement, but notice that they have to give directions. You know, Shiloh, that place you've probably never been before. Well, it's north of Bethel. It's east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem and south of Lebona. You know that place? Oh, yeah, I've never been there before. That's a problem. That's a problem. They had never been there before, because everyone should have been going to Shiloh annually for these festivals. They don't say what festival it is. They don't even know how to get there. It just shows more and more the absolutely bankrupt spiritual nature of the people. So they end up going up to Shiloh, continue to look for working on this last loophole of snatching these wives. And you got to think about it, or snatching these women or young ladies. And you think about it, yeah, their brothers and fathers would probably have an issue with that. What are you doing? Number one, taking these women from us. Number two, we said we can't give these women to the Benjaminites. Oh, well, don't worry. You're not actually giving them. They're just being stolen. What? It is unreal. You know, one note here, going back to chapter 5 and verse 30, where Sisera's mother is waiting on him. Of course, he's not going to come back because he's been killed by Jael with a tent peg through the temple. But she talks about how, oh, I'm sure, you know, he's going to come back. He's going to have women that he's brought back with him and his troops. Again, just showing that women are treated as nothing more than bounty of war. That's the exact way that Israel's treating women. And really all throughout the book of the Judges, women are constantly abused and neglected. And that's awful. And that just shows again the depths of depravity that the nation has fallen into, in the fact that women are continually mistreated and abused in so many different ways. But what's so interesting as well, the way we have our Old Testaments organized, is that we're going to turn the page to Ruth tomorrow, and we're going to read chapters 1 and 2, and we're going to see where a woman is actually the one that takes a real step forward in faith. And that just shows us, again, the fact that it's done by a Moabitess shows us how far down the road of sin Israel itself has gotten. You can't find any faith in Israel. Can't find faithfulness there. But we're going to be able to find faith out of Moab in the form of Ruth and the journey that she goes on throughout that text. So I hope that you'll tune in for that tomorrow. Just one other thing, just connect with the text elsewhere that we're going to read later on in a few days. And we read 1 Samuel chapter 11. We're going to read about Saul, who is a Benjaminite, actually saving Jabesh Gilead. Why? Well, because he recognizes he would not be around unless those women from Jabesh Gilead had been given to his ancestors in Benjamin. So just another intertextual connection there. We'll probably do my best to remind us of that once we get to that text in 1 Samuel chapter 11. I appreciate you tuning in for this reading today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave that in the comment section below. And please use Judges, use the poor judgment of the people, use all of their mistakes as a warning to us and an admonition to us to not go in the same direction, to not live as if there is no king, and to not live according to whatever seems right to us. That's only ever going to end in unfortunate failure and disappointment and consequences. May we learn from the poor example that we see here within the book of the Judges. Hope you'll tune in tomorrow as we begin reading a much brighter chapter in Israel's history from the book of Ruth. We'll read chapters 1 and 2 tomorrow. Hope you can tune in then. Take care and God bless.